Thanks, I. Uh, so yeah, a little bit I'll tell you brief. So that was introduction. So I have been working in medical device industry from 2008 onwards, primarily at GE, then a startup in Delhi in Windmill, which is a startup in Delhi. Moved to Chennai Phoenix Medical Systems. I think it's a well-known name in Chennai, Phoenix Medical Systems. There worked on a couple of interesting projects as well as regular products. So you might have heard about Arise, the manual standing wheelchair. So that I was kind of part of that team, which was co-developed with IIT Madras, and then there was another project with IIT Delhi, which was about a refreshable braille cell, which is used for. Uh, I mean, it was developed to be part to be of a. I would say it's like a computer for a visually impaired person. So both the products are in production right now. Not much of a knowledge as of now, like what is happening on those two products, but yeah, definitely as what I remember and I have correct knowledge. So those products are in production and people are kind of using those products. Then move to NCR region again for personal reasons. Right now, working in Boston Scientific and lead design engineer, working on one of their products. So yeah, that's about me. So let's move into the presentation. So this presentation basically talks about like how do we do product development in an organization like Boston Scientific or say Phoenix Medical Systems or GE Healthcare or anywhere. So there is a slight difference when we look at a product development which is done at academic institute versus industry. So I'll try to brief and based on my understanding and my knowledge of working in medical devices for over I think not really, yeah. So first few slides talks about a very generic information. It may be you might know all those things, but just to set the context, I would like to introduce those things. So what is a medical device? One more thing, if you have any question on any slide or anything, you can ask right away. I don't have much slides to present, but I'm trying to cover up is a very high level the the workflow what we do actually in industry. So a medical device is any device which is intended to be used for diagnostic, therapeutic, or any medicinal purpose. So that includes from a highly complicated CT machine to a very small needle what you see at the end of an injection. So all those are medical devices. Their development varies, their complexity varies, their usage varies, but all those actually comes under medical devices. So any question on medical devices or any thoughts? Okay. Yeah. What is the key aspect of a medical device? So this basically what probably we all know. So key requirement for a medical device, it should be safe. So that is related to patient. Easy to use, which is related to operator. Reliable, which is related to hospital. So any of these, I mean, failure in any of these aspects would really make the acceptance of a new medical device a little difficult in the medical world. So any question on this? So now I'll come to some other key requirement which probably once you come to industry, people see those requirements coming into picture. So which is meeting local and international regulation. The reason why it is there. Uh, it has to be accepted across the globe if we are looking for that kind of a product development. But even then, at least in India, people are kind of coming up with the regulation. So this is still in progress, but in Europe and US, there is a well-known established. So in Europe, it is called CE marking. In US, it is called FDA, and in China it is called SFDA. So I mean, there is varying name of those international regulations. But primarily, all those regulations come from ISO standard, and the primary basis of that standard is ISO 13485, which defines the quality system for medical organizations. Then the other important aspect is sustained manufacturability, because we are looking when we work on any particular product. This is one of the key aspects, because we are not looking to develop one, two, or maybe 10 or 15 or 20 prototypes, or even a product, but we are looking the manufacturability of the product over years. It could be 10 years, it could be 15 years, it could be more than that, it could be even lesser than that. But again, it has to be, it is one of the key considerations while designing the product. Then other smaller but equally important aspects are project timeline, product cost, project cost, and serviceability. Serviceability, I would like to touch upon a little bit. Serviceability is not applicable through and through for all products. So especially it is applicable for bigger product, or a complex product which requires servicing or a preventive maintenance over years. So something like a CT machine or a ventilator or a CPAP machine or an X-ray machine, yeah, definitely the cost for those machines are pretty huge. So replacing those machines is not an easy task. So what we look for is the serviceability. We design in such a way that a component can be replaced in a much lesser time. The components are easily available to the customer, and reliability. Yeah, reliability itself is another key requirement which comes. Which basically we try to cover under serviceability, so that the preventive maintenance is not done so often. So typically, preventive maintenance, what we try to target is somewhere around once in a year, or if it is a very complex or it has a high level of consumables, probably once in a 6 month. So that kind of a target what we set when we look for serviceability. The another key important thing is we could design a machine which is highly complex. It is possible to assemble it, but when it comes to servicing or replacing the parts, so if that aspect is not taken care, it will become difficult, and the downtime will really become longer for the device. Any question on this? Like, okay. So what is the typical design process? This I have tried to take it from ISO 13485 and put a little elements which are kind of not explained explicitly in that. But what typically we do is we collect user need, we do a risk management, we look at local, international, and local international regulations, club all those things, and then derive the design requirement, which is basically here. So this itself is a very iterative process. It's not a straightforward one-to-one mapping that you do these things once and then you just basically do. So user needs is what we call as voice of customer. So here customer could be your inpatient, it could be operator, it could be physician, it could be as simple as ambulance operator. So if, let's say for example, if we are looking to develop a stretcher, then the real operator is the ambulance driver, or the assistant who is going to handle those devices. Risk controls, how does it play a role? So definitely here what we try to assess is like, if something goes wrong, what would it cause? So what if it causes called harm? Then basically in certain situation, basically it's a hazardous situation and a harm. So that is all controlled or kind of documented here, which is called risk control measures. It is important to do this activity so that we don't miss out the safety part of it. So here what user wants, this is the safety part of it, and this is what regulation wants. So there are individual, in some cases you may find a particular standard which is defining all the requirements at a very high level. If it has to be very specific or a certain safety aspect of a device has to be captured as a part of regulation, yes, then it is captured here. But primarily, the safety aspect of the device is captured via risk control. So we take all those things and then convert into design requirement. So design requirement is something which is more technical, which is more what engineers can understand. So here, for example, I'll say user need. So I want a device which is easy to use. Now, when you look, so definition of easy to use is pretty open. So how do you convert that into design requirement? So we sit along with as a cross-functional team with industrial designer. We sit with customer to understand what they mean by easy to use, and then convert into a technical requirement, which is kind of against which we can design. So we take those design requirement, which is spoken and unspoken, and then try to develop the product. So during the development, once the development is done, we basically derive certain outputs, which is in form of a drawing, schematic, manufacturing instruction, molds. It varies. It varies upon product to product development or the type of product what we are doing. So once that cycle is over, we take it through a design verification cycle. So in design verification cycle, what we try to do is we try to see whether our design output, so which is a finished medical device, is able to meet all the requirement what we have listed in design requirement. The another word what we call for design requirement is design inputs. So if you somewhere here like this is the design input, it means a design requirement. So once that cycle is confirmed, so if there is a failure, we go back. The cycle keeps on continuing till we see a pass on the design output. So all with the design outputs, we try to build a medical device. Okay. Medical device, and then we take it again back to for a design validation. So in design validation, we try to do that. Are we able to meet all the user requirements, which user has said to us, and which we have listed under user needs? So we go back and perform these cycles. So typically, this is a typical cycle which is followed in any industry, whether it is GE, Philips, Siemens, or even as small as windmill or something else, and it hardly matters. This process is derived from ISO 13485. So, any question on this slide?
Sir, Amit, I have a question here. So,
Yeah.
You are just following certain regulations, right? So, though we have different regulations like BAS and ISO regulations, so every country is following their regulations. In few cases, even China is having some other regulation. So, how do you work on different regulations and finally get succeeding in getting the product to be a approved one?
Okay. Okay. So how it works? So basically, let's say we are trying to develop a product which is to be sold in US. So US is FDA, and then it has to be sold in Europe, which is CE. And let's say we are also planning to launch this product in China. So China is SFDA. So now we look at all these requirements individually. So let's say what is written, what is the requirement from FDA perspective, what is the requirement from C perspective, what is the requirement from SFDA perspective. So if mostly what we see is around 75% they are common. But again, country to country based on their intent and regulation, some of the requirement may be additional, so that also get added up to the scope. And if it's the same requirement, but one country says I want to follow a stringent control, so then that becomes the control point. Rather than, so if FDA is asking for a, let's say, loose control, EU is asking for a little tighter control, and SFDA is asking for a very tight control. So the tightest is the specification for us, or it becomes a design requirement for us. And the reason is simple: if we are able to meet the tightest or the stringent requirement, then yeah, definitely we also meet the other requirement. So yeah, so when we look into design requirement, it's a combination of uh, all the regulations what we are trying to comply.
Yeah, thank you.
Hope that answers the question. Your question.
Yeah, thank you, thank you.
Okay, so now little detail. This is again high level, but yeah, but typically what we do, the actual way we little varying from product to product. But when we look for let's say design input development, how do we do design input development? So we get an initial input from physician, like okay, or physician or clinicians or business, or it could be anybody for that matter. So that okay, we have to develop a certain product. So I would take an example of one of the product which I developed at Phoenix Medical Systems before leaving that. So it was a critical care ventilator. Again, due to the COVID situation, all of a sudden the team decided that okay, let's develop a ventilator. Okay, good. So then how do we do it? How do we develop a ventilator? What is the requirement? So so these are the some of the steps, not all of the steps. What could be followed? So what we did, we looked at competitor products, so which is from GE, Philips, Siemens, Hamilton, Draeger, and then try to derive a comparable spec. Okay. So again, there could be a limitation because of your time, technology, all those things, and the level of complexity what we want to introduce in the project. And again, it is intended for again the decision is based on who is the intended user. So for us, it was an adult ventilator, so we don't need to really worry about what is the specification around a ventilator for neonatal or pediatric. So definitely. And then you conduct an interview with the user. So the user could be anybody actually. So physicians, operator, patients, etc. I mean, I listed some of those user in one of the earlier slides. So who is going to use this product? So we talk to different physicians across the country whom we get in touch with regular. So we get input like what kind of a device they are looking for. What is the price point? What is you could go from very clinical to technical to purely non-commercial. So you could talk about price. You could talk about what is the clinical benefit they want to achieve with this product, and then what is the technical spec in their opinion could be acceptable in the market. The another key activity which can be performed, which is the operational research in a medical setting. So there also we went to Kamaini Hospital and a couple of other hospitals to see like how the ventilator is being used. So that gives a lot of input. The reason why this is an important activity was sometimes user may not be able to say what they want to say. Studying their behavior and studying their day-to-day routine kind of gives clues to what could be the requirement. So then we take all those inputs and try to put a user need. So user need, one of the some of the key aspect is it has to be very clear. It cannot be very vague. So like I want to be like something like it should be easily operatable. Okay, how do you define? So a little clarity has to be done because this is kind of a document which goes to the regulated body, and we have to perform a validation. If you are not sure what user is asking for in that particular user need, it will be very difficult to validate because there could be a huge time difference between when you establish the user need to when you actually validate them. So the user's perception, user's thinking, user's behavior can change in between that time frame. So making it clear is one of the important aspects. It has to be concise. The reason for being concise is so that it doesn't cause any ambiguity. The moment any ambiguity comes into any of your design inputs, it becomes more and more difficult as we move forward with the product development. The another thing, it should be aligned with the intended use and it should be aligned with the user feedback. So these are important aspects which has to be taken care while you are working on developing the user needs. So why it is? Because if it is not aligned to intended use or user feedback, then yes, we are not meeting the customer requirement. So all the activity what we have performed here really becomes kind of a meaningless. This is more of a perception. Again, one of the keyword what I try to use is it should be unbiased. It's not important what we think. It's important what these three guys or maybe four guys or maybe five guys think about the product. Our job as a design engineer is to develop what they are asking for, not we think what they are asking for. So yeah, so in that sense, this user need is important. It is a good habit or a good practice to kind of get it reviewed with some of the key stakeholders. So which could include the marketing team if it is available. It could be physicians. It could be anybody who is going to give you a feedback which will basically try to establish a good user need. So once that is done, we kind of take that back, sit along with us, use quality tools like DFMEA and Pareto. So there are, I mean, a number of tools you can use based on what is required, and then convert into a more technical form, which is a design requirement. So again, design requirement is something what you are going to verify. So it has to be technical, it has to be clear, it has to be number driven. So something like, again, I should be able to, I'll try to give an example of kind of vague design requirement is something, the force required should be acceptable. Yeah, we try to introduce some technical terms, but again, still, what is acceptable? So, what is acceptable to me may not be acceptable to a nurse, may be acceptable to somebody else. So, yeah, so that way we have to put it, we have to try to basically make it complete so that, I mean, it's a complete requirement. That, for example, the force required to operate a particular lever shall not exceed 5 Newton or 10 Newton or 20 Newton. Okay. And then it has to be non-ambiguous. It has to be non-conflicting. So again, one of the important key thing what has to be remembered when working on the design requirement is you should not have a requirement unless and until it is warranted and it is required to have a conflict with another design requirement. You know, that kind of narrows down really the scope for development. It should be it should be verifiable. That means you should be able to verify it that, okay, so in that case, for example, I kind of put a design requirement which is the force required to operate a lever should not exceed 10 Newton. Yes, it's easily verifiable because I know I have to press the lever. I mean, it could be done in a simulated condition, doesn't need to be done by a user. And there should be a linkage to safety, performance, and regulation. So these are the important things. So why regulation actually still has to be captured here. So something, if you look for standards, so some of the standards actually talk about your technical performance and technical safety requirements. So those has to be explicitly listed in the design requirement so that we don't lose the focus on those aspects. So any question on this slide? Okay.
I think there is no question, so we move on. We can move on.
Yeah. So now, I mean, how do we? I mean, what do we do during development process? So develop the design using some of these. These are not all the things what we could do, but yeah, definitely we should use the best technology available for us if it is allowable and if it is available. Use a lot of engineering principles. Don't go by gut feeling. have a solid basis for your design decisions, what you are trying to do, justifiable, maybe do a mathematical modeling or perform a structural analysis or a thermal analysis or any kind of analysis for that matter. It hardly matters. But the basis for your all design decisions should be based on engineering principles. Use quality tools as much as possible. Use some of them as like I can't think of as of now, but yeah. So there are a lot of tools which are available during development process. The second important aspect is mature your design by continuous design testing. So don't wait till the product is developed and then we'll do the testing. Take smaller steps, do a particular component, do a particular subsystem, but do a particular aspect of medical device, test it, implement the improvement opportunity, implement the feedback, what is available, implement any of the failures, correct the failures, all those things. Keep on doing it. It's a continuous journey throughout the cycle. And that's what I've tried to represent with this small flow chart. So you take a design, do a design testing, look at an improvement, go back and incorporate it and keep doing it till it is satisfactory or it is working either satisfactory or it's absolute. And one of the important thing what we have to remember is we should not look for to meet this. So we could look to find to. So there are two ways basically when you are doing a design testing. You could look for either you can look for meeting the intended or the design requirement, or you can look for how can I fail this product. So the difference, there is a very small difference or a subtle difference between both the approaches. So when we take that approach that okay, I have to just meet the requirement, or I am okay if I just meet the design requirement, but then the testing what we are doing is under simulated condition, under lab condition. So the actual conditions will be totally, it could be from totally different to partial different when it goes to the repeat. So we don't know how it will be used, when it will be used, and for what it will be used. So looking for failures is important, and that's where what we try to do is we try to fail those components. And another important information what could be derived from that approach is what is the design boundaries where the device is going to fail. So let's say if my design boundary is x by x, and I know by all my testing that the product is going to fail with 2x by 2x. So it gives a lot of confidence. It improves the reliability. It improves the confidence of the design team on the product. That okay, even if we go outside the boundary, even if the device is operated outside its intended boundary, it's not going to fail. Now, basically, why failure is critical if it is being operated outside the intended boundary, it's the quality. It defines the quality. It defines the brand name. It defines the confidence of the customer on the product. So these are some of the things which nobody will tell you to design for, but yeah, these are always there. The brand name of your organization, the confidence of the design team, the confidence of the customer, so all those things basically matter when you are doing this during the development process. You could do all those things a little later, or maybe once your product is ready. But the problem is if you find a failure which is found once your design is complete, it takes tremendous amount of time to fix it. So any question on this slide? Okay, now what do we do in design verification and validation? This is again a highlight. What we need to do in design verification and validation. So these are some of the pointers. We could go in detail like what is design verification, what is design validation. But yeah, when you are performing a design verification, use an unbiased approach. So what do we mean by unbiased approach? So typical tendency of any engineer is let's try to pass it. Let's try to meet what is asked for us. But rather than let's look, so the approach should be, when you say unbiased approach, it means that okay, I'll not try to meet it. I'll try to see, find out like how it fails. I'll not write a verification procedure which will make sure that the design requirement is met. But I'll write a design procedure in such a way that I should see a failure, or if there are some complex way to not complex, but there is a way to fail it, I should document it. So that's what we mean by unbiased approach. So another important aspect is plan ahead, test early to avoid unexpected failure. The typical timeline for performing a validation from development, it could range from months to years. So the development, let's say, started. So typically, a ventilator would take around a couple of years in the development phase only. So, and the verification is performed and the validation is performed after those once it's done. So if we see an unexpected failure which is happening during design verification and validation, it will take tremendous amount of time and resources, which is money, and to kind of fix it. So do it early so that your verification is kind of easy to do and you don't see a major hiccup. Use tool with end-to-end traceability. This requirement comes primarily from regulation. So let's say for a simple example, if I have a component and I want to do a design verification on it, and the verification what I am performing is on the length of the product. So I could use anything to from a very simple scale to a vernier to a visual measurement system. The question is it reliable or is it satisfactory? Is it trustable, the device what we are using? So that is what we mean by traceability. So today, let's say when we are working on design requirement, we are available, entire design team is available, entire testing team is available. But tomorrow, some of us may not be available. So how do we ensure that tomorrow when things goes for, let's say there is a design change and somebody is doing it, that we have done it correctly in the first place. So this end-to-end traceability ensures that the things happens properly, correctly, in control every time. So a similar approach we have to take for design validation, use unbiased approach. So here meaning is a little different for an unbiased approach. We should not try to influence the feedback what we are trying to receive from the user. It could so the question should be a little more open-ended rather than asking. So that one of the simple way to basically is like, do you see a problem with the device? Or so that's not a correct way. So you should ask a question in a very simple terms. Yeah. And you could do with comparative testing with a similar product. So let's say you could evaluate the performance against establish the product which is there in the market and establish the performance. You could do a simulated functional test which could happen in lab, it could happen in a clinical setting. And definitely we should take out the product which is for validation and get it evaluated by a physician. Here a large number of physicians may not be required, but definitely some of we could take it to few physicians and take their feedback. And again, we should give time for them to play with the product here. And the question should be framed when you are taking an interview post their evaluation, which is basically trying to capture their feedback, which will help to improve the product. So these are some of the approaches what could be taken while you are performing design verification and validation. So any question on this slide? Okay, so that's a typical design cycle what we follow, and at a high level. Now, basically, summary like what we have to do to make sure that we don't see unexpected failure at the end of the product development or during the launch or in the field. So establish design input correctly and appropriately, which is really required. Don't miss out any of the a key aspect of the product, the performance or regulation or safety. Apply best engineering knowledge and technology to develop so that this is more. This has a more so that the time taken to develop a product is lower, the cost is lower, and has a high level of reliability. Perform early testing and implement outcome feedbacks. It's a continuous activity throughout the development. So keep doing it as your development progresses. Seek expert advice and opinion, both technical and clinical. Since we are into a medical device, so and we are developing a technical product, so an expert advice is really really important, both from technical and clinical standpoint. Adopt an unbiased approach for testing and evaluation. So as kind of mentioned through the slide deck, uh, we should not be looking to pass the product. We should try to look for failing the product. Another important thing which typically I tell people who comes or are kind of younger to us is just remember we are developing a medical device. It seems unfortunate and it is actually unfortunate that either us or somebody whom we know or somebody whom we care or love at some point could be under these medical devices. So make sure that when you are working, developing on these products, you should be proud when if some of us are kept under these medical devices, and we should be willing to accept that situation that if, let's say for example, ventilator, if we work ventilator or CT or X-ray, or even it could be even as a simple injection, a syringe, a disposable syringe, that we don't have any apprehension when those medical devices used on any of us. That's all. Thank you. Any question we need to take?
So there are a few questions in the chat box, sir. Let me just read them out for you.
Sure.
The first question is they've asked if there are any statistical methods performed to check performance of devices or by performing on field tests.
Yes, yes. There are a lot of I'm not a statistical expert, honestly speaking, but we use some of the tools, statistical tools, but it kinds of get limited. And again, it depends upon what you are trying to verify. Let's say you are trying to evaluate two design. So, and you are trying to evaluate, let's say, force to lower the head of the X-ray machine. Is it substantially different? Is it same? So you could perform a two sample t-test. Get the force values through any of those methods or engineering methods, and then try to evaluate and try to derive statistically either similar or different. So yeah, there are many tools available. I would highly recommend to use those tools when you are doing. Don't rely on simple calculation of mean, average, and standard deviation, where I think statistically kind of takes consideration of a larger population. Because during testing, what you will be testing is hardly couple of samples, or maybe if the product or if the prototypes are more, you could test even a higher number. But definitely performing and going through the statistical analysis really helps out to build the confidence.
Okay, so hopefully that has answered their question. The next question is they're asking what is the meaning of unbiased approach, sir?
Okay, so I'll give you an example. Let's say I am a designer. Okay, I am a designer. So I design a product. So typically, what will happen? So at the back of my mind, it is always there because of organizational pressure, appraisal pressure, timeline pressure, cost pressure, that let's try not to fail it. Okay. Now, what will that result in? Let's say, the requirements are available. We develop the product and we kind of did the testing and everything is fine. Good. Now, when you go to a field, so one of the simple example I can give you. So somebody who is developing an automobile, the best example I could think and I kind of give to people is two-wheeler. So typically two-wheeler is designed for how many people? Two. The maximum weight capacity, if you read their manual, is 120 kg. But in realistic scenario or in the actual scenario, how many people you are sitting on the two-wheeler, how much excessive loading you have seen on those products. Now let's say we have just meet like it should be capable of handling two people, 120 kg, and it has to be driven on smooth road. So those are some of the requirements. Now what will happen if you let's say load, I would say 200 kg. So easily like 3 people or 4 people would easily come to 200 kg. And then what will happen to your device or a product? Now just assume that you have designed for 120 kg, it is meeting all the requirement. Now the device is loaded for 150 kg, it goes on the road and suddenly it breaks or it fails. So there is a damage to the device, there is a damage to the user, there is a consequence. The consequences are pretty high. So that's where unbiased approach is required, so that you take it to the failure. You try to determine the failure. So let's say in the same case, my requirement is 120, but I know realistically that I have to design with a factor of safety of 3, 4, or maybe 5. We don't know. I mean, depending upon how rough the usage is going to be, how bad the usage is going to be. So yeah, again, it's a team-dependent activity. So while doing testing, just don't look for meeting the requirement, but try to go beyond what is required. So another example I could give is around that I can write a verification procedure. So I think nobody asked like what is the importance of a verification procedure. So verification, once you write a verification procedure for a particular requirement, it ensures that if a different person is testing rather than a design engineer or a testing engineer, the testing will be performed under similar conditions or will be performed in a similar way. So now I can write a verification procedure in such a way that it will not expose any failure point. But again, we can, or I can take an approach like I'll try to write a procedure in such a way that it will challenge the design or it will challenge the tester to challenge the product. So yeah, those are some of the examples which could be incorporated as into the whole development scheme as an unbiased approach. Another example I can give on user need. Let's say I'll give you on user need. So, so clinician is saying that okay, I would like to use it for let's say this device for 5 times, or the procedure is demanding to be used. So basically, for example, let's say catheters. I'll take another example. So catheters, they will say that okay, I could reinsert. I can take out the if the insertion is not correct, I can reinsert the catheter. But then I could safely assume. So typically, what happens is like the normal understanding of most of the people is like once you insert the catheter, you perform the procedure and you take out the catheter. That's a very nominal cycle. Now, what could happen? They could extract the catheter and re-enter it. Yeah, so those are the things how you interpret it. So I could even take one as a nominal cycle, or I could take like okay, my device should be stable, sturdy for multiple insertions, even though it is never going to happen. But yeah, I know in some cases it could happen. So yeah, we could choose either one of them as a user requirement or a design requirement. So taking a safe approach, taking a little bit conservative approach for your design requirement kind of falls under unbiased approach.
Thank you, sir.
Hope that asks questions.
Yes. The next question is they're asking you to suggest any open source software for design or simulation of a device.
Okay, so for designing there is no software. I can tell you honestly. So again, there is a difference between designing and implementation of a design. Okay, so when you come to a software, I could say like for mechanical, it's say SolidWorks or Pro Engineer, CATIA, NX, there are n number. Those are all tools which is going to implement your design. It's not going to design anything for you. It cannot, because it doesn't have a capability. Similarly, for software, let's say the Python, C, C++, or anything, it is going to implement what you are thinking. What is your design? So design, it can be developed on paper. So for example, my example, if I take 90% of the time, I'll draw the intended design on a paper, then take it to CAD, convert it to CAD, because now the advantage of using a CAD is like it's the transition from a concept or a design to a manufactured part. The CAD has made that journey a little easier. Okay, now for so this is about design. For simulation, again, depending upon what simulation you are performing. So for example, let's say you are performing a structural analysis, and I hope I think in colleges I mean there is a student version available for most of those CAD software. They primarily come with the analysis part of it. It has a limited capability. I understand that it cannot perform with the equal level of ANSYS or any other software, but definitely you could use those inbuilt capabilities to perform a basic simulation and then interpret those results. So again, I would say that performing a simulation is one part of it. Using a software is kind of simplified the calculation what probably 10, 15 or maybe 20 years people were doing manually. So they used to use all the engineering principles, do the calculation manually, interpret the results, and then derive the outcome. Now that the job of doing the calculation and converting into an understandable result is all done by software. But yeah, the essential part is always how do you interpret the result and determine what is the implementation or the outcome of that analysis you want to take. So any of the free software difficult, but I think as a student you can get the student version from any of these, either SolidWorks, OE, and even I think from I mean these two I know available. Others may be also available as student version that you can use.
Yes, sir. So the next question is, do we consider biocompatibility testing in case of invasive devices?
Okay, so I'll ask one question. Okay, and the answer is in that question. Let's say there is a medical device. Let's say there is a syringe, there is a tooth implant, there is a knee implant. If you are a designer, what would you prefer to have? Do you want to evaluate it for biocompatibility or not? I mean, why I take syringes and these examples, because at some point, all of us has gone through that or used that medical device. Now, would you like to perform a biocompatibility evaluation? I think the answer would be obviously yes. Yes, it's an important aspect of any medical device development, and over and above it is asked by regulation. So even though you want to skip it, if you are looking for, and it's a good practice. So that practice, the hurdles of that practice or the evaluation can be really simplified if the material selection is done appropriately. For example, there is a difference between the material what is used to make a drinking bottle like this to a medical device. So the material what is used for this is a food grade. So food grade doesn't mean it's not equally compatible to biocompatibility. In biocompatibility, there are three criteria. So which is short-term duration, long-term duration, and in long-term duration, which is again there is something called implant. So the requirement and the evaluation criteria changes from what your device, I mean, how your device is going to be used.
Thank you, sir. Are there any other questions from the participants?
Sir, I have one question. What is your recommendation to the academicians to convert from academic research into the industry expectations? So most of the students' project or the concepts developed by the faculty members and students are in prototype level, but it is not market given to any market which is not, there is some lack between the industry expectation and the academic research. So what is your recommendation?
Yeah, so definitely, I mean, what is the difference between academic project and industry project? That's what I think the answer lies there. So when you are doing an academic project, the concern what kind of I have seen is it kind of limited to like whether, I mean, my project will be accepted, it will give me a good marks. When we look at a product which is getting developed in the industry, we have to look for commercial viability. We have to look for clinical acceptance. We have to look for market acceptance. Okay, so if it is not meeting any of these criteria, it could be a failure. The best example I could give, and I kind of gave, is the Nano. So it was a pretty decent car, not very highly priced, but still it is considered, or it kind of comes under a failure as a product. There could be many reasons. So when you are working on, let's say, a project which is required, again, the purpose should be very clear. Are we looking to develop that particular concept or a prototype for further evaluation, or either as a product for the market, or we are looking for only to serve my academic purpose? So yeah, if you are looking for serving the academic purpose, I think you guys know more than me how to handle those products. But definitely, when you are looking for to develop a product or trying to solve a problem, now when you say about a problem, is it really a problem? The first question. So for example, I mean, okay, I can't think of any example right now, but is it really a problem? Have we discussed or kind of got feedback with the users? So when I say users, it could be you and me also. Now, as a user of that product, it doesn't need to be always physicians, clinicians, doctors, nurses, and those guys, but even you can think. So and that's where basically that unbiased approach kind of helps. So you put into yourself into that user shoe. Well, if I develop this product, am I willing to use it or buy it or get it used into one of my family members or friends or known people? If yes, you go ahead and develop that product, and then you follow the basic principles of it. Your prototype, once your development cycle is complete for a prototype, do all the required testing, take it to the market. When I say market, it's about physicians, clinicians. Take a honest feedback, and now if you're looking for something, a product to be developed for market, and you're looking some industry too, so always try to collaborate have a partner, have them as a partner, so that there is some kind of liability. Feedback flows into the product development, and they have a willingness to take it forward. So I mean, once industry partner has been involved into your academic project development, so a lot of other things comes into picture. All those things which are kind of limited and kind of exercised in an industry comes while doing a particular project. So for example, I can give, let's say, if the wheelchair what we developed at Phoenix, if Phoenix would not have been there, the project would have been kind of limited to IIT, more limited to academic purpose, but never went into industry. The advantage what Phoenix brought in to us, the manufacturability, the acceptability, the cost targets, the project cost, the cost in terms of both project and product cost, the sustainability. So all those things angles comes into your development cycle, which I'm not sure people try to consider, but how much seriousness is given to those aspects, yeah, it depends upon what is the intended of that particular project. Hope sir, this answers your question. I mean, it's a wider topic.
Yes,
And
yes.
again, it changes from case to case and project to project.
We have another question in the chat box, sir.
Yeah.
Will there be any scalability issues with respect to biomedical devices?
Scalability. Can that person ask the question, because I just need to understand. I mean, what do you mean by scalability?
Ma'am, could you unmute and ask your question, ma'am? He says from a small scale to a large scale.
Uh, yes. Okay. So scalability is you are looking scalability of a product or a organization. So I mean scalability from a product. Yes. If manufacturing consideration has been done, if it could be manufactured with ease, it could be distributed with ease. It could be Uh, I mean, it doesn't need an extensive setup to kind of make that product available to the customer. Yeah, scalability becomes easier. It's only matter of time and money what has to get implemented. But if it requires a complex manufacturing process, for example, so scalability of those processes becomes difficult, or you have to develop a new manufacturing technology to kind of make that product or manufacture that product. So that would kind of limit to the scalability. But on a general scale, scalability is never an issue. At least in my opinion. Again, it depends upon what kind of a product or a project or a concept we are working. Scalability should not be an issue. The technologies are much better compared to what they were a couple of decades back.
Thank you, sir. Hopefully that answered her question. Are there any other questions?
Okay, I have one question if nobody has a question. So, I mean, we have still around half an hour. Let's try to interact. So, first question is, how many of you are understanding? I mean, this is the process what is typically followed in industry. I mean, this is still very high level. I mean, the training what we generally get in any organization in the initial few days, that ranges from days to weeks on the whole design and development process itself. So, I mean, there we go in detail, and there'll be like work instructions available to us. We have to go through them, understand them, and in some cases there would be an exam to kind of check our understanding if the work instruction is kind of critical for development. So yeah, but this is at a very high level. So typically, you guys basically work on more projects than probably what I work in my entire life, entire working career. Probably you guys work on more than what I do. So do you feel anything which is important for you guys to uh, understand? Probably I could touch on those subjects or topics. Or any challenges what you might have faced in past while development or while evaluating the project or kind of understanding the need, or any message which you want to give it to industry back. Either ways is okay. Okay. Oh,
Sir, there are more questions in the chat box now, sir.
sure. No issues.
They're asking if for clinical validation, would you suggest any alternatives for doing the same during this pandemic situation, sir?
Okay. Clinical validation again. So there is a difference between validation and a clinical trial. So are we talking about clinical trial or we are talking about clinical validation?
Clinical validation is what they're asking for, sir.
Okay, so clinical validation is typically called design validation. Okay, so there actually you don't need to, it is not required to perform or use the device in actual clinical setting. You could, people could basically either, like in this online way, you could do it, you can get a feedback. We actually perform the initial, I'd say clinical acceptance, I would say, or physician acceptance for the product which we are developing right now. It was done through online, so you could send the device to them. You can come with virtually with them and seek an advice. Whereas if you go for a clinical trial, it would require to be used in on a patient.
Yes, sir. So
Or you can call a physician to your facility and get a feedback. I think that it's not a bigger concern. I think using on actual patient would be a real concern, and that's what, if I recall correctly, we were facing when we were developing that ventilator, to see whether the device is performing properly and appropriately. We actually have to go to hospitals along with the device. So me and my team went up till Kamaini couple of times, and we were there in Vizag, King George Medical College for a week to get the device tested on actual patient. So yeah, and that was last year. I think pandemic was just started to come down, but yeah, that risk and that I would say it is a risk, especially when it comes to the personal safety. But yeah, somebody has to take that with necessary safety precautions.
yes, sir. So the next question is they're asking what is the role of antennas in practical biomedical equipment?
Antennas.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Antennas.
little bit. I need little more understanding. I hope it is going into electromechanical devices. I could be able to answer if I know specifically what is the question. It's a broader topic. So what I understood, if I understood correctly, the purpose of an antenna is to receive or send out signals. Correct. Now, a little more detailed question is there, then I can, or the person who has asked, If they can give me exactly what they want to know, probably I could help to answer it. If not, I'll try to get an answer.
Could you elaborate on your question?
Good morning, sir. Sir, I just want to know how will you incorporate antennas into biomedical equipments?
Okay. Okay, so I'm not. I'll try to give a kind of a brief. So, so as an antenna, basically it will send out signal and it will receive.
Yes, sir.
So one of the important aspects is that it should not interfere with any devices which is present in the medical facility, and it should not get either interfere with the other devices or it should not get influenced by the other devices. So
Yes.
there is a EMI EMC requirement as per ISO standard, so that has to be met. So in terms of the now basically physical embodiment of an antenna depends upon what kind of a medical device. If it is, let's say, an implant or an external device, you could have whichever way. I mean, if it is an external device, yeah, it is. You could do it in any ways. But if it is an implant or something which has to be concealed, then yeah, the physical embodiment changes based on what is the device and where it is going to be used and what is the purpose we are trying to solve. But on a general scale, the regulations limits the performance criteria for antennas, or actually for that matter, any electromechanical device or electrical device, to be specific. What those numbers are there, I think the standard is 60601-1-2. I hope that helps you.
Has
I'm not
that
an electrical.
answered your question, ma'am?
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
So the next question is, can you please elaborate the role each government agencies involved in approving a medical equipment?
Okay. So I'll try to answer in a different way. So the government agency, what they make sure is that you follow so government body in the case, like in India, as of now, the government is coming up with a medical regulation. So can't recall, but in, let's say, Europe, it is CE marking or MDD it is called now, and then in US it is FDA. So their role is to ensure that the device meets the required performance criteria set by the regulation of that country. So they have a full right to either approve or reject based on what we submit as a technical file. And another aspect is on the commercial side of it. So let's say if we don't get an approval from the regulated or a government body, then the commercialization in that particular country is impossible. So that's the role. So they are kind of a gatekeepers, I would say, a traffic policeman.
Yes, sir. So the next question is clinical validation and design validation the same, and also FGIs?
FGIs.
The question says FGIs, sir. Also FGI.
Okay. Can somebody, can that person tell what is FGI? So I'll try to answer first part of the question, which is design validation and clinical validation is same. So there is another important aspect which I kind of pointed out earlier, which is called clinical trial. So if it is a new device, for example, first time, or a new functionality has been added to an existing device, it has to, and it is not available in any of the equivalent product, then it has to undergo through clinical trial, where the device is used under a controlled environment on an actual patient, and the outcome is established. Whereas in clinical or design validation, you just basically make sure that your intended design is user needs are met. You don't see any or a major feedback on improvement. So those are the two essential requirements to meet a design or a clinical validation. Now, what is FGI? I mean, if somebody can explain, I can try to answer that.
Yes, sir. I think he was just adding to your previous answer, sir. He says FGI is a regulation for approvals of the medical equipments.
FGI, okay, I'll try to find what is FGI. I have never heard of it, but FDA definitely I heard of. No issues.
Any other questions? Would anyone like to unmute and ask any questions to sir?
Okay, thank you, sir. I think there is no questions from. Yeah, there is one more.
There is one more question.
Yeah.
Are the rules of approving the medical devices different for different countries?
Broadly speaking, it is same, but on a certain aspect they differ. And the reason is, I think in my opinion, has more to do with kind of controlling unregulated product coming to their country. For example, I think China is the most notorious player in this field. Like they want to regulate any device which is coming to the country from outside. So the most severe regulations, what people have seen, comes out from China. I mean, they go above and beyond what we typically say, but the reason could be anything, but yeah, it differs from country to country. And typically in India till now, CE marking or an FDA was an acceptable norm, but I think in last couple of years, India has started to draft their medical regulations, which is again based on ISO, and all these regulations, the primary source for all these regulations come from ISO standards or international body.
Thank you, sir. Are there any other questions? The next question is, does India follow EU MDR?
Yes. Okay. If you ask by country law, I'm not sure, but no. By country law, no. But as a good practice, yes. So if you look at any tender, whether from government or private hospital, it will ask for a CE marking or FDA approval as a mandatory item. The reason is simple. Regulation ensures that the basic safety from a medical device is met. So without any regulatory approval, the confidence of a physician or a clinician or a hospital authority or a government sector, the confidence is not there. So it's always good to have either CE marking or FDA. So CE marking and FDA are generally acceptable norm across the globe, where they don't have, with the countries which don't have their own regulation.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions after this? I guess that's the end of the question, sir.
Okay.
So thank you for giving such a nice presentation on medical device development, and hope all the academicians and people from industry got benefited. So in your busy schedule, even in your product delivery, you spare your time and give a nice presentation upon our acceptance. Thank you, sir.
No, I mean, it's pleasure to be associated. I think the first time I came to SSN was a couple of years back for evaluating college student project. And I really liked the project, what was done over there, but definitely felt a need that the information which is lying in the industry has to come into academic world so that a little mature level of at least prototype development happens. And another reason it kind of gives give them the students confidence once they enter, or I would say not confidence, but a kind of a head start once they come to industry, because the moment you cross college or academics and come to industry, it's a totally a different world. There is based on your which industry you are entering, the learning cycle could last from months to years. So that could be kind of shortened. I'll not say it cannot be completely eliminated. Even from organization to organization, there is a learning curve. So when I look at GE versus Boston Scientific, still I mean I know pretty much of the way things are done, the technical stuff, the procedural stuff, the regulation stuff. But yeah, still things are done in a little different way from organization to organization. So this kind of gives student a heads up who are more interested to come to industry and work on medical devices. Yeah, so I am ready to share any kind of a feedback if anybody has any question. Sir, you can share my mail ID. I have not kind of listed it here. I'll be happy to answer any of the questions, whether from student or staff or anybody.
Yeah, sure. I will share it to the participants as well. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thanks for your
Thanks.
wonderful presentation. Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks all. Thanks. Have a nice day.
So, dear participants, the forenoon session by Mr. Amit Kumar has got over, and the next session would start by 11 today. The presentation will be given by Professor Ajit K. Abraham from All India Institute of Speech and Hearing. He will be giving a presentation on precision health technology for the assessment of speech and hearing disorders. Please join with us by 10:50 a.m. Thank you.